The clam.
The clam before the...
The strom.
Yes. Pastrami. The clam before the pastrami.
Welcome back to another episode of Liveship. I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And this week we're talking about chapter 31 of Madship, The Calm. And no surprises there, the next chapter is called The Storm.
Calm before the storm.
Exactly. So we are here with Keffria to start off this chapter, one of the rare Keffria point of views. And they are getting ready for the ball, the Traders' Ball, where Malta is going to be presented. And she is talking to Malta right now, who is in a mood.
Yes. I believe the last time we saw Malta, she had fainted, quote unquote, on the deck of the Paragon. And I think...
maybe one other time besides that, but maybe not.
I guess the last time we had Keffria's point of view is when Malta had fainted.
Yeah,
because we have Malta's point of view when she comes back, maybe.
Maybe. Either way, this is the first real catch up with her and her thoughts. And she is not doing great, not looking great. Keffria thinks she's used too much powder because she's so pale, but Malta says, I haven't used anything yet. And Keffria, of course, is just the worrying mother, thinks that she's just anxious about the summer ball, and too many things have happened leading up to it.
Right. I will say last time we saw Malta, the town was thinking there might be a war,
right,
and she was refusing to stay with the elderly and children.
Yes.
So a lot has happened.
Yeah, so Keffria is here wishing that things could have gone differently as well, because not only Malta was looking forward to this, Keffria as well dreamed of her presenting and being proud of Malta walking in like a brand new dress and all this sort of thing. So we kind of get it from the mother's point of view too, that she wishes things could have gone differently. But instead, Malta is going to be dressed in a dress concocted from older gowns, and her only jewelry would be gifts from Reyn rather than a woman's wealth bestowed by her father. It was neither fitting nor proper, but what else were they to do? It rankled. She saw her own frown in the mirror over Malta's shoulder. Self-consciously, she smoothed it from her face. I know you didn't sleep well last night, but I thought you were going to rest this afternoon. Didn't you lie down? I did. I couldn't sleep. Malta leaned closer to the mirror, pinching at her cheeks to try to bring up some color in them. After an instant, she seemed caught in her own reflection. Mother, she asked quietly, do you ever look at yourself and wonder if there was someone else inside? So there's some interesting things in the next couple paragraphs, but to set up this chapter, she has not been sleeping well. And reading between the lines, it's quite obvious that Tintaglia is also bothering her dreams. But she isn't as open to the scale in my interpretation as Reyn, and so isn't fully aware of what is happening.
I would argue that it's just that she isn't getting tortured in the same way Reyn is.
That's fair.
I don't think she's getting dreams of being a dragon. I think Tintaglia is just saying, you need to help me now. Like, I'm the only one who can save your father.
Right.
Instead of the punishment. Because Reyn is being punished for turning his back on Tintaglia. Malta has not done that.
Right.
So, yes, I guess where I stand, it's just a different type of sleep deprivation.
That's fair. Either way, she has not been sleeping well, and we can tell it's because Tintaglia has been bugging her during her dreams.
Right. And of course, Keffria doesn't know about any of this, so it's very worrying. And this is a different side of Malta.
Very introspective.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting having this be from Keffria's point of view rather than Malta, because I think we don't get to know what's keeping her awake, although, we know, but we don't get the exact information. And with Keffria, there's this weird layer of dissonance where she still sees her daughter as a young child, it seems. And so it's hard.
As the young child that we first met.
Yes. Yeah. So I think acknowledges that Malta has grown up. And at one point she says the summer has been too hard on Malta. But it's really this really interesting thing where Keffria still sees Malta as this pure, innocent young girl who doesn't really understand the ways of the world and has to grow up too fast. But that's really not who Malta is. And so it's interesting to have Keffria's point of view while Malta is struggling with these real kind of adult problems and fears. And Keffria can't really be there for her because she's not able to see Malta as anything more than a child.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
So Malta asks, do you ever look at yourself and wonder if there is someone else inside? What? Keffria took up the hairbrush. Under the guise of smoothing Malta's hair, she felt her skin. She was not feverish. If anything, her skin seemed too cool. She lifted up the heavy flow of Malta's hair. As she began pinning it up, she reminded her, you need to wash the back of your neck, or is that a bruise? She bent closer to look at the pale blue spot. She brushed at it and Malta flinched away. Does that hurt? Not exactly. It buzzes when you touch it. What is it? It's just a grayish blue spot about the size of a fingertip. It looks like a bruise. Did you bump yourself when you fainted on the ship? Malta frowned. Perhaps. Does it show much? Should I powder it? And Keffria covers it with talc. But this is the beginning of a scale.
Oh. I thought this was the mark that got put on her from the skill with Amber.
Wait. Why would it be blue, though?
I don't know.
I thought this was the beginning of a scale, maybe ushered in by the silver on Amber's fingertips.
I mean,
because that was on the back of her neck.
Yeah.
Now that you bring that up, that reminds me.
Some silver is kind of bluish in tint.
Yeah, but it's like the silver on fingertips is never remarked on as bluish silver. It's always just like pure silver, right? And this is pale blue.
Mm.
I think I like the combination in my head. I think it's kind of the silver, like the dragon in Malta, the connection with Tintaglia kind of latching on to that silver that Amber imparted to her and kind of beginning that change early.
Could be.
In my mind.
Okay. I just think because it's the size of a fingerprint.
Yeah, that's true.
To be fair, also silver can look light blue in certain lighting. We don't really know what time of day. It's later, I think. So could just be dark and it looks light blue. I don't know. Maybe it is a scale. We'll have to wait until she gets more.
Yeah, I know for sure Amber did touch her with her bare hands, with her silvered fingertips. So that is definitely something that happened to the back of her neck. But the grayish blue spot is, I don't know. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see whether that transforms into more scales or not.
Yeah.
But it's covered up for now and brushed over and brushed past. And Malta continues on with her conversation. Sometimes I don't know who I am anymore. Her voice was apprehensive rather than dreamy. I'm not the silly little girl I was last summer, all in a hurry to grow up. I've tried to be responsible and learn all the things you've tried to teach me. A part of me knows that they are important. But in all honesty, I hate the fussing with numbers and the constant juggling of this debt against that one. That isn't who I am either. Sometimes I think of Reyn or another young man and my heart flutters and I think I could be so happy if I could just have him. But a few minutes later, that all seems like pretend, like a little girl being mother to her dolls. Or worse, it seems that I just want the man because he is who I wish I were, if that makes sense. When I try to think who I really am, all I feel is tired and somewhat sad in a way that doesn't have tears. And when I try to sleep and I dream, the dreams seem foreign and distorted. Then when I wake up, the dreams seem to follow me, and I find myself thinking someone else's thoughts, almost. Does anything like that happen to you? Keffria was at a loss. Malta had never spoken like this before. She put a falsely bright smile on her face. My dear, you are just nervous, and it is making you have all these odd thoughts. Once you arrive at the ball, your spirits will rise. This will be quite a ball, such as Bingtown has never seen. Our problems all seem quite small to me when I consider all that is happening in Bingtown. Here we are, blockaded in by our own harbor by Chalcidian galleys that claim to be the Satrap's patrol. The Satrap himself and most of his entourage are staying with Davad Restart, and the Satrap will be coming to the ball tonight with several of his companions. That alone will make Bingtown history. It kind of continues on here saying, like, even those who are really against Jamelia will see this as a momentous occasion, blah, 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 blah. And some of those people think that the Satrap being here means, we're on the brink of war, but I think it's shows faith that he's trying to negotiate. Before we move into that conversation about the Satrap, because Keffria does sidetrack this conversation and Malta away from her first tact, I want to talk about Malta's little, conflict in her mind. And as you said, a lot of this is a maturation of her thought process, right? It's probably from growing up too fast, going through a lot of traumas and a lot of hard-hitting reality for a 13/14-year-old girl.
Right.
It's a lot to come at you in 1 year. But also the last part here, when I sleep and I dream, the dreams seem foreign and distorted, and I wake up, they follow me, and I think somebody else's thoughts almost. I think that's still dragon dreams following her. So I think it's her growing up, but these issues being compounded and amplified by Tintaglia's meddling.
Yeah, I definitely read this as a lot of maturity and growth from Malta. I think it shows that she's starting to realize that this idealized picture that she had a year ago of what being an adult is not reality, and that
like the romance novel life is not real.
It's not real, and it can't be kept up all of the time. And I think especially her line where she says, I fear that I only like these men because that's who I wish I was.
Right.
I feel like what she means is she wishes she had more freedom and power. And as she's growing up in this last year, she realizes that the role of a woman that she has been looking up to, that she has been idealizing, is really stifling in this society, and that it's actually not as cool as she thought it was, especially seeing the difference between herself and the male counterparts, what they are able to just do, the power that they hold that she will never be able to access.
Right.
And I think that's a really important thing that Malta is going through right now. And it really saddens me that she's trying to reach out and ask for help from her mom. She's trying to get reassurance of making sense of the world kind of tilting on its axis for her. And her mom is just brushing that aside as, oh, you're just nervous about the ball. It's okay. And that makes me really sad.
It's not even that Keffria thinks that's what the issue is with Malta. She's just assuming that is because she doesn't want to talk deeper or dive into those problems right now.
Yeah, which I don't understand. I don't get.
I think it's because it scares Keffria, because those are questions she never answered for herself. She just got married to the first man who asked her to dance, basically.
Yeah.
And he directs her whole life. And now finally the last year she's been waking up a little bit too, but she probably hasn't even come close to those questions or those answers yet herself. So it's probably something, it's weird, one, as we talked about before, Keffria sees Malta as that little girl still, that flighty kind of little girl that Malta describes herself.
Right.
She's like, oh, I'm not that girl anymore. Keffria sees her like that little girl. So it's probably weird hearing these thoughts come from her.
Right.
And not being able to reconcile that view versus what's in front of you.
Right. And I guess the only way I can come at this scene is from the point of view of someone who is a daughter, not a mother, because I don't
Yeah,
have kids. So I don't really know what it's like whenever your kids kind of grow up too fast and you don't really know, or there's a situation where you don't know how to talk to them. But it does. And so I don't want to say like, oh, she's a bad mom for not, because who knows how you would react. But I do just feel sorry that she's kind of keeping her relationship with Malta at arm's length, that there's this opportunity here for them to become closer. And instead, she still keeps her at a distance, I guess, which
yeah,
is kind of the whole problem with Malta, that she doesn't really get enough attention from her mom.
right.
And that hasn't changed even now. And that's kind of sad. I don't know. It makes me a little bit more sympathetic to Malta. I think that she's going through this and doesn't really have anybody to talk to that will talk to her in a way that makes sense. I feel like maybe Ronica would be a good person to talk to in this situation, but I don't.
That's not the relationship at all.
No. So I don't know. It's just sad to me that the one woman that Malta tries to open up to has to be Keffria because Keffria kind of handles it really poorly.
Right.
And I mean, I guess what else you do? And she's trying to, I think, cheer up Malta in her own way, right? By bringing up the ball and saying, this is going to be the best ball ever and it gets to be your debut ball. That's so exciting. Like, you should be more excited. So I get that it is a tactic to lift her spirits, but
Right.
it is really superficial and not. It feels more like Keffria wants to be Malta's friend and not her mom. And not even a good friend, just like I don't know, like a superficial friend.
And just as an aside, I kind of want to throw out the thought, maybe think on how much did her experience with the ship and with Amber kind of give to this identity crisis? Because when you're centered in the skill or you're losing yourself in the skill, you don't know who you are. You're kind of losing yourself. And the way you center yourself is saying, I am me, Malta Vestra. That's how she's called back, or Malta Haven. That's how she's called back, right? So I'm wondering maybe that this loss of identity could have been sparked from that as well. It's kind of everything happening the last couple weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think too, just the fact that she is so confused and kind of feeling lost of what's going on. What does this mean? Who even am I? Probably also stems from the fact that she has been disillusioned to men and I mean, like in their role in her life, because she
the power that men hold.
Yeah, because she just assumed they could fix everything, and she's been shown time and time again they can't.
Right.
And so I think that too just really, I mean, everything she fundamentally believes has been thrown into question at this point, especially like her dad is this amazing captain who is safe and now he's captured by pirates. And what does that mean about everything else that she believes? And I don't know. I think it's really well done. It feels very realistic to have her have this confusion and this feeling of who even am I anymore in the face of everything that's happened over this last year. How am I?
Right.
I don't know. But it is artfully pushed aside by Keffria.
Yeah. Who brings up the satrap, and, why else would he have come all this way? And Malta adds with a skewed smile, and brought so many fine Chalcidian galleys and mercenaries. I have heard it was to protect himself from pirates on his trip up, Keffria told her. The girl sounded altogether too disillusioned for her years. Had they done this to her? Had their discipline, lessons, and chores destroyed the selfish, flighty girl and replaced her with this weary, cynical young woman? It squeezed her heart to think so.
Why would you want your daughter to be selfish? ?
Right. And no, it's not all that,
Right.
If nothing else was going on, their lessons and discipline would not have made her into this person.
Yeah. I just don't get, I don't know. I don't get Keffria in that. I feel like the more we see from Keffria, the less I'm team Keffria.
Maybe that's why she's forgotten in the last trilogy.
Yeah. It just is so, I don't know, making her less prepared for adult life is not a good choice. And the fact that you're upset, or like she's upset that she's growing up too fast. Like, I know that's a typical thing parents don't love, but I don't like that that's centered around her becoming more mature is a bad thing.
Yeah, I think it's just the guilt of everything has been happening and we've pushed her to share in that burden with the other adults. So she's had to grow up. And I think it's like, did we push her too fast, too hard? She kind of lost her innocence and youth. And maybe that's our fault. I think it's just kind of a guilt that Keffria feels, maybe. And, it's not rational. It doesn't have to be rational.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm imagining it mostly stems from.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't know. But I do find it really odd that Keffria is so pro Satrap and Malta kind of seems like she isn't, question mark. It just is, I don't know, really weird.
Well, I mean, again, Keffria is putting a good spin on everything, right? She's trying to cheer Malta up and change tactics, get her excited about the ball. So she's not going to say like, oh yeah, we're probably on the brink of a war.
Well, but I don't think she believes that. Like, I genuinely believe what Keffria is saying here is what she believes is happening. Like, she's choosing to believe everything's going to be okay now that the Satrap is here. See?
Maybe, yeah.
Because I kind of feel like Keffria is more naive than Malta in a lot of ways. She
says, I prefer to believe that the Satrap intends to correct the wrongs done us. Why else would he have come so far? So, could be.
Yeah. I don't know. So, which, not that it's naive to want to hope for no war. You know what I mean? Like, that's a good hope to have, but I think it comes across as naive whenever you know how he came into town.
It just, like, the way this conversation to me plays off is that Keffria is trying to be the optimist, all the while Malta is being, the cynic and the pessimist. And that's what Keffria is lamenting, right? Immediately after that fact. It's like, had they destroyed her precious little girl to become so cynical? So, yes, maybe Keffria does believe, but I feel like, in her own words here, she wants to believe that. And Malta all the while is like, everything else has gone wrong. Why wouldn't this be the worst option as well?
Okay, fair enough.
But they do discuss other news, and they ask, did they let the other ship come in, the one with the nobles aboard? I heard that the new traders were quite upset about them being turned back. Many claim to have relatives aboard. And the update here is that, the entourage with the Satrap, the ship wasn't allowed to come in, but those nobles could come aboard by small boat.
Right.
They didn't want any of the Chalcidians coming into town, but eventually they were allowed to come ashore, the kin to the new traders.
Right.
They are not Chalcidian mercenaries. What harm can they do us? Keffria asks. Malta shook her head. No more than their relatives have already done, I suppose. After the Great Panic, when all those ships came into the harbor, I expected we would exercise more caution. We learn a little bit how the people who were back in Bingtown spent the all day prepping and didn't hear anything until late that there wasn't going to be a confrontation.
Right.
Keffria shakes her head at the memory. And she says, well, we didn't hear anything because nothing was happening out there. Our ships held a line across the harbor mouth. Chalcidian galleys formed up across the sea entrance. I am glad all parties were reasonable and there was no bloodshed. Mother, there has been no trade since then. Trade is the lifeblood of Bingtown. There is no bloodshed when someone is strangled, but it is murder all the same. The Chalcidians let the Kendry into the harbor, Keffria pointed out, with your young man aboard. And they closed up the blockade behind him. Were I the captain of the Kendry, I would not have brought him in. I suspect that they only let him through to have one more live ship corralled into the harbor. They fear our live ships since Ophelia stood up to their galleys. A mirthless light dawned in Malta's eyes. This part to me seems like it would be better come from Althea's mouth than Malta's, this argument. And like this thought about trade and live ships.
Yeah.
Malta hasn't expressed any interest in that before. It wasn't really a thing. Even when she's talking to like Reyn and things like that, they didn't really talk about those kinds of politics or trade.
Yeah.
So to me, this, just the last couple paragraphs, seems slightly out of place for her. I mean, obviously, she is a daughter of a Bingtown trading family. She has spent almost a year looking at books and learning about these things, but it still seems slightly off to me.
It feels weird that she's suddenly anti-Chalcedean, considering her
Right.
father is half Chalcedean / full
Yeah.
Chalcedean. So, yeah, I would agree that there's something. This feels more like a Ronica conversation, even.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
Althea, I guess, but it is a little weird, but I guess.
I know, like, Robin Hobb had to get the information in there, and this is, like, the best place. It just
Right.
seems slightly out of flavor with Malta's kinds of conversations, you know?
Fair
And I
enough.
understand that she is out of sorts in this conversation. It just, that doesn't quite make up for this change of topic in my eyes.
That's fair. Yeah.
But
No, I think it is definitely one of those things where it's a little odd, but it is kind of an information dump. So
Right.
I am willing to overlook.
yeah, same. So Keffria tries again to cheer Malta up and basically says Davad Restart's promised to introduce us to the satrap. You know, that's a great honor. But she says, yet I suppose you will hardly have eyes for the satrap once Reyn arrives. The Cooper's family is always known to distinguish itself in matters of dress. Your young man will probably be resplendent. You will be the envy of every girl at the ball. Most young ladies spend their presentation ball dancing with fathers, uncles, and cousins, or standing modestly beside mothers and aunts. I know I certainly did. I would throw both Reyn and the satrap aside, could I have but one dance with my father. I wish there was something I could do to bring him home, something besides this eternal waiting. She sat for a time in utter stillness, staring into the mirror. Suddenly she drew herself up straight and looked hard at her reflection, saying, I look awful. I have not slept well in weeks. My dreams, when I do sleep, allow me no rest. I shall not go to my presentation looking like this. It is too important an opportunity. May I borrow rouge from you, mother, and something to make my eyes look brighter? Of course. Keffria's relief was so intense her head swam. She knew this, Malta. I'll bring it to you right now while you finish dressing your hair. And as she finishes up the conversation, she just reminds the audience here that Davad is going to be busy ferrying the satrap and companions to the ball, so they had to rent a coach.
Right. So I do feel like Keffria definitely made a big misstep being like, at least you won't be with your dad, brothers, and cousins. That'd be embarrassing.
Right.
While her father is literally being held for ransom. Well, I guess not for ransom because they haven't gotten ransom, but her father has been captured by pirates. A little bit of a misstep there. But what do you think snaps Malta out of it? What do you think makes her go back to regular Malta in Keffria's eyes?
It's hard to say because that can just happen naturally. I don't know if anything has to have snapped. It's interesting that she does say, like, I wish I could do something to bring him here besides endless waiting, when Tintaglia probably for weeks has been pounding at her, like, release me and I'll bring him to you.
Right.
But there's nothing really there indicating that Tintaglia was whispering to her right there, other than she was just staring at the mirror, at a reflection into space, maybe. So that'd be the only option in my mind if something did happen. But I think it was just kind of a end of the conversation, enough, self-reflecting on this. Let's turn to the task at hand.
Interesting. I thought that the reason why she suddenly sits up after saying, I wish there was something I could do besides all this endless waiting, is because she realizes that she still has men to manipulate, and potentially that could still give her an outcome, especially because Reyn is coming.
True.
So she's got to look nice. She's got to see what she can do. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't feel like.
Could be. Definitely a reason.
Yeah.
She sits that time in utter stillness, kind of thinking about it, and then all of a sudden, like, okay.
I have to look good if I'm going to do something, going to convince others. Or even just the mention of her meeting the satrap. There's somebody with a lot of power.
True.
He could help. Let's look good. Gotta look good to make a good impression.
True. And we jump over to Serilla, and her plans are in total disarray, is the first line of her point of view here.
Yes.
Not only had the younger sons from the second ship managed to talk their way ashore, they had brought with them the remainder of the satrap's entourage from the main ship. The only positive aspect of that, as far as Serilla was concerned, was that her clothing and possessions had been brought ashore as well. In the days since then, not only had her control over the satrap withered away, but he had recovered his strength with amazing rapidity. A healer had declared the satrap was mending well and given Serilla the credit. Cosgo still believed that she had saved his life, but with Kiki and his pleasure drugs restored to him, his dependency was fading. Their host seemed bent on nourishing him with every rich food imaginable and cosseting him with constant entertainment. So Cosgo's restored vitality had set her plans awry, and now she had to scramble to solidify what she had and modify that. So forgotten now is the scroll with the satrap's signature on it, granting her powers. One trader did ask her about it, but she just said, Satrap Cosgo's recovered health makes it not necessary, so don't worry about it. So she's keeping that as a trump card hidden away. Doesn't even know if Satrap Cosgo remembers signing it.
Right. And she thinks that she would be able to convince him that he did and convince him of really anything if she was given time, but she doesn't really want to pursue that avenue right now.
Right.
She seems to be trying to distance herself from Cosgo, which makes sense for sure. I mean, he's an awful person. She doesn't even like him. But it also doesn't make sense in the fact that if she stays away from him, he's out of her grasp. And so you would think she would want to stay near him, if only to be able to control him more. I don't know. It's really interesting to me, this whole, now that she's on land, she kind of is separating herself again and hiding,
She's
kind of
going
hiding
back
away.
to what's comfortable, right?
Yeah, which makes sense, obviously.
But she is describing her current surroundings now, and she says, she was definitely in the provinces, she reflected to herself. And of course, they're at Davad Restart's estate, so not everything is in the best condition, but also she is obviously from a very pampered background.
Yes.
Extremely pampered and spoiled background.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because I don't know that she would think that of herself.
Oh, no.
Like, she likes to think of herself as this, like, I don't know, dignified lady who doesn't need the finer things in life. Like, she prided herself.
Scholar,
Yeah, she prided herself on not ever being given jewels, because who cares about jewels when knowledge is afoot?
Well, she has jewelry from the first satrap.
Yeah,
but she never accepted anything from Cosgo.
Right. But I think specifically she said that he rarely gave her jewelry because he was usually giving her books instead.
Yeah.
Because that's her thing. So she gives off that she thinks of herself as this like humble woman, but
the housemaids only brought her warm wash water twice a day, and there were no fresh flowers in her room. The household had provided the companions with only one personal maid, and Kiki had kept the poor girl at a dash since then. Serilla had had to tend to her own needs. That suited her at present. She had no desire to allow any stranger access to the items concealed in her room.
She also mentions that the chamber itself, though large, was both outdated and musty with disuse.
Yeah.
The bedding smelled of cedar and storage herbs, and the hangings were of a style that her grandmother would recognize.
Good old Davad Restart.
Not too surprising. I mean, maybe a little bit surprising because he updated his carriage and his clothes, so you'd think he would have updated all
Does
the
he have
parts
enough money to update everything?
Yeah, fair enough.
And these are the good stuff, right? This is probably like family heirlooms passed down. They're nice.
Yeah, as far as he knows.
But she says it's not the niceties that convince Serilla to make that her area of expertise. This pioneer town had managed to survive when nothing else had. In all she had ever read or heard of Bingtown, nothing had ever explained to her satisfaction. Why had it survived and prospered? What had set it apart from all those other tragic efforts? Had it been the people, the location, or purest luck? There was a mystery to be probed here. And kind of describes Bingtown a little bit after this.
Right. I think it's so interesting to me that the people who currently live in Bingtown were the only ones to make it work. does that mean that other people have tried? Like
Yeah, I
there
think
multiple times? This is just the first time it stuck?
I think there were maybe in the first book random throwaway lines of there had been other, voyages out there, but finally the last ditch effort was like, hey, you convicts and other people who are exiled, have this land or leave forever, kind of thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
And they made it work because it was their only opportunity. And some people stayed along the Rainwild River to deal with that. And other people eventually moved to where maybe fertility rates aren't that great, but people can survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
I
is
guess.
something that Serilla talks about too, the fertility rates.
Yeah. She talks about how it was surrounded by a network of outlying villages and farms, yet, for the number of years that it existed, it had not grown as large as one would expect. The population did not thrive. Even the influx of the 3 ships' immigrants had been only a temporary swell in population. Families were small, with rarely more than 4 surviving children. The wave of new traders threatened to displace the old Bingtown traders with their sheer number, not to mention the slaves they had brought in with them. So it really explains how the new traders are able to take so much power
Mm-hmm.
and puts into perspective the fact that because of the
The curse of the Rain
the, the
Wild.
curse of the Rain Wild, these families aren't growing at the rate that they could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And Serilla remarks that there is pushback about expanding into the countryside. The growth was not welcome. The reason offered was that much of the ground was too boggy and that tilling up what looked like a wild pasture usually transformed it into a marsh by the next spring. Good reasons, but Serilla had always suspected there was something more going on. Take, for example, the so called Rain Wild traders. Exactly who were they? They were not mentioned, at least by that name, in any charter issued by a satrap. Were they a group of Bingtown traders that had splintered off? A native people? Why were they never openly discussed? No one ever spoke of a city on the Rainwild River, yet there must be one. All the most fascinating goods from Bingtown were always touted as being from the Rain Wilds. Little more than that was said about them. Serilla was convinced that the two secrets were linked. In all her years of delving, she had never found the bottom of that mystery. Which is true. They don't want to expand. One, because, the land is not good. But two, they don't want the city and the outskirts of Bingtown to encroach upon the Rainwild's secrets.
Yeah.
That's kind of the pact that they made, right?
Yeah. I wonder if it's just that or if it's more fear of the plague coming back. I mean, I was thinking about that too with the lack of growth. It would have been devastated by the blood plague, killing so many. So I wonder how often plagues roll through, if that's a regular thing.
Again, we don't know if that came from the Rain Wilds.
Right. Well, I'm not saying it did, but I just, in general, how often are plagues happening in this society?
But we know birth is hard on women in this area.
Yeah.
In general. And on children. It's hard on children too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's magical reasons why it's not growing as well.
Right. But I also thought it was such a good point brought up by Serilla, something that I hadn't thought about until now. And that is, why are the Bingtown traders talking about the goods from the Rain Wilds if they want to keep the Rain Wild traders a secret? That is such a good point. If it's this big secret and they don't want anybody to know, outsiders can't know, why even say that's where you got it from? Why not say that there's a dig site somewhere in Bingtown? You know?
I mean, Serilla is a scholar specifically on Bingtown. So we can view her testimony here and her thoughts as kind of the expert outside opinion. So not a lot of people would have the same depth of knowledge. She seems to have heard of the Rainwild traders when no one else really has that we've seen, but they say that their goods are from the Rain Wild, right? So I think most people kind of just leave it there. They're just like, oh, these are magical goods from that region, cool. And then they just don't dive into it.
I guess.
And no one really cares enough except for Serilla.
Fair enough. Okay.
That's my guess on it. I'm taking her testimony as like more in depth and more interested than literally 99% of everybody outside of Bingtown.
Sure. And I mean, like, hearing the Rainwild traders in passing is something that she has heard that other people haven't. But nobody's questioned, what do you mean these goods are from the Rainwilds? There's no settlement there. That's the part that's
Yeah.
like, what a great question, actually, because if they are trying to keep it a secret, why even say that's where they're getting it? Like, you don't have to know about the traders at the end of that to know it's weird that they go up this river that nobody, with their special boats, nobody can go up there, and then they just have goods.
I kind of am picturing this as like, I don't know, long time ago, or in like another fantasy world, or like Aladdin or something. Go in Aladdin, go to a market and be like, these magical goods came from the middle of the desert. People will be like, whoa, that's awesome. They're not going to be think like, okay, what native tribe is there finding these?
I guess. Yeah.
It's just that kind of thing. Like if you're selling these goods away from Bingtown and trading them in far off lands, it's like, oh, it came from a faraway land and it's magical. That's awesome.
Fair enough.
If you're in Bingtown, then you know enough to keep quiet about things.
Yeah. And I guess that does make sense too, why the new traders are so greedy to get their hands on
Right.
wizard wood to get up there, because they're, to their imagination, there's just piles of treasure
And
sitting
these
there.
old traders are gatekeeping them.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't want you to be wealthy here because you're not welcome here. And they're like, this isn't fair.
Yeah. There's literally free goods on the ground and I don't get to pick it up. What?
Yeah. But Serilla is kind of trying to think on that, or at least Robin Hobb's telling us Serilla's mindset going into this. Yes, she's excited to be here. It's not quite up to her living standards, but she's not here just for, their amenities.
Right.
So she's looking at other things, and now she's in Bingtown itself, or at least the outskirts of Bingtown, but hasn't really left the estate because Davad Restart doesn't really want them to leave.
Right.
And she notes that is to his advantage. She doesn't really mind yet because she's still getting her bearings, but she notes that a lot of people are coming to visit Davad Restart, and it doesn't seem like a lot of people did before.
Right.
She suspected from the disused state of her chamber that Trader Restart had not enjoyed such a jolt of popularity in many years. Yet she was more than willing to smile and greet the traders, both old and new, that came to call. Every association that she could form, every woman she could dazzle with casual tales of palace life in Jamalia, was one more foothold in her new home. For so she still intended to make it. Perhaps her opportunity to seize power had slipped away, but she still had a hope of making Bingtown her home. So she is here to stay. They're kind of closed and closeted in Davad Restart's house, and he's making full advantage of having the satrap and the companions inside of his home. So he's having people visit him, gaining more power, more connections, and being kind of the go-to guy for this.
Right. He is definitely utilizing the fact that he's the only one that talks to both groups of people.
Yeah.
And using that to his advantage. He's trying to bring himself back up to the level he was, I assume, when his wife was around.
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out that since Serilla has been in Bingtown, there have been earthquakes, small earthquakes, every single day. And that has been something really hard for her to get used to, but it doesn't seem like the people from here even notice them happening.
Mm-hmm. I remember it mentioned in maybe like the first couple chapters.
Yeah.
Of Ship of Magic, and I always forget about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. It must be like, I don't know, I guess, is it that bad in California? I was trying to think of somewhere else where like earthquakes happen, but
no. I mean, it happens more often there, but not daily.
Well, no, but I mean, in California, would somebody who is from California, or at least has lived there for a long time, even be bothered by a slight tremor? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they would. You'd be scared about it, right? But if
I don't know.
If you were born and grew up where the world was shaking once a day, at least, I think you'd kind of get used to it eventually.
Yeah, because our main characters don't even ever mention the
Yeah,
ground shaking
they don't.
unless they're in Treehog, which those do, but that's different. So anybody in Bingtown never mentions these mini earthquakes. So it's really interesting to find out that that is a usual occurrence.
Yeah. The first one that she experienced, she exclaimed in surprise, and Davad kind of shrugs his shoulders like, just a little shiver, nothing to be concerned about. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's all he mentions. And it's just something that she has to get used to, she says.
I was wondering at first if this was connected to Tintaglia throwing a fit, because we know whenever Reyn was leaving the tunnel, she was angry, and then all of a sudden there was a big tremor.
Right.
Which doesn't mean that she was connected to that tremor, but it does make me wonder,
Very
like,
fortuitous, though.
yeah, like what's going on? How? I don't know.
But Serilla, with the thoughts of, her surroundings, her goals here, she turns her mind to the task at hand, and her dream is about to come true. She is going to see Bingtown tonight. They're heading out. They're going to a summer assemblage of something, or the traders held of some sort,
She gathered that by their standards, it was quite an affair.
And we get kind of a full-on restriction, or like a full-on guest list that Serilla says. It was for Bingtown traders only. Outsiders were admitted only if they had married into a Bingtown trader family. The young women would be presented as being of age, and she had heard some rumors of offerings of friendship exchanged between the Bingtown traders and the Reyn wild traders. Now that, she told herself, was a fascinating internal distinction, one that was not spoken of in Jamalia. Why were offerings exchanged? Did one group subjugate the others? Questions. Serilla frowned at her jewelry. She could scarcely wear what she had filched from the satrap's chest. Kiki or one of the others would be sure to recognize it and comment. And this is where she's like, she could probably convince the satrap to recall that he had given it to her, but, she's not really going to do that.
And she hasn't thought about it until now, so there's not time anymore.
Yeah. So she's going to go unadorned. But she also recalls some gossip that she heard from Davad Restart, and we get more insight onto the goings-on in the social hierarchy and the gossip that's going around town.
The gossip about the Vestrits, which is so juicy and good.
Well, Reyn Kupris of the Reyn Wild Traders was actually already courting a young girl who was to be presented tonight. The other old traders present had sternly hushed her. Then the woman, one Refi Fadden, had been bold enough to defy them, pointing out that surely the satrap and his companions would be introduced to young Kupris at the ball. What was the point of concealing who he was? Davad Restart himself had intervened. The host, who had been almost stiflingly accommodating to that point, suddenly invoked his power. But you cannot discuss young Kupris without mentioning the Vestrit family and the young lady in question. In her father's absence, I regard her reputation to be my responsibility. I shall not tolerate any gossip about her, but I shall ensure that you shall meet her personally after her presentation. She is a dazzling young lady. Now, shall we have more cakes? He had effectively ended the conversation. While some of the Bingtown traders had regarded him with approval, a few of the others had rolled their eyes at his circumspect ways. Interesting. She could sense the pull and stress of power at play here. This Davad Restart seemed to be some sort of bridge between the old and new traders. Circumstance seemed to have landed them in an ideal position, for both sides of the divided society seemed moderately comfortable in calling on Davad. While the new traders brought the satrap extravagant gifts and invitations to their homes, the Bingtown traders brought only their dignitary and implied power. She did not think the satrap had made a particularly good impression on the old traders, nor they on him. It would be interesting to see how things proceeded. There was so much going on here. It was so much livelier than the staid and stagnant court at Jamalia. Here, if a woman was bold, she could make a place for herself. Interesting.
That's an interesting thing to think after being there for a few days.
Right.
That women have power in this society, or the ability.
They could, yes.
Yeah. I just find that so interesting with all that we know that absolutely is not true. And it's maybe more true here than in some of the other places
Right.
around, but it's very looked down upon. It's going out of vogue. So it is, I don't know. It's just this whole thing is so interesting to me. I especially find it interesting that Serilla is intrigued by the gossip, and this is so much more entertaining than anything happening at court back at home. But it feels like maybe that's the case because these people aren't real to her.
Yeah, they're not real. And also, she didn't really involve herself in gossip as far as we know.
Yeah.
She tried to avoid all the gatherings. She's like self-professed.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, this is a very interesting power dynamic if you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, right?
Right.
You have one trader kind of speaking up and gossiping about, oh, they're, courting even though they're not supposed to be yet. And a couple of the other traders like, no, hush, we don't talk about it, even though it's, a known fact. It's like, that's improper to talk about.
Right.
And then her being like, no, they're going to meet Reyn. It's fine. And Davad being like, no, it's Malta who I'm concerned about. Stop talking about it.
Yeah. Interestingly, it feels like the other traders didn't want Fifi to talk about
Refi.
Sorry.
Refi. Refi.
They didn't want Refi to talk about the Rainwild trader.
Yeah, that's what's implied by Serilla's point of view. Yeah.
Right. Which I think is the case. I don't think you're not supposed to talk about them to outsiders.
Right.
Odd to me that somebody from an old trader family would openly talk about the Cupresses.
Could be a new trader because it just says one of Davad Restart's visitors and that a couple of the old traders hushed her.
Why would a new trader know who a Cupress is? Or that Rainwild traders exist?
Yeah, true. Probably an old trader. I'm just saying, like, it doesn't specifically say. It's probably an old trader.
Yeah. I think it's becomes cloudy because then she goes into the fact that he seems to be a middle ground between the two.
Right.
But I think it's only old traders in the meeting.
That particular scene?
Because
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about names.
Yeah. They're talking about old trader gossip.
Yeah.
Because I think from what I understand of the politics, even the old traders that are still pro Satrap are not pro new traders.
Usually, yeah.
So I wouldn't think that they would be comfortable telling new traders things.
Yeah,
even you know
fair.
what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, maybe whatever. It doesn't matter. But
yeah. But also, Serilla points out that Davad had surprisingly spoken up and put a kibosh to something, besides just letting everything happen and being very accommodating.
Right, which does make him seem somewhat adept at handling social situations, which points to the fact that he has to be aware whenever he is being socially impolite, if he is able to artfully and skillfully navigate this situation.
It's not really artful and skillful. It's just basically being like, I am a very important person in this young lady's life, and I'll introduce you, of course, but don't talk about her now because it's my place to do so.
I don't know. I think it's done really well in a matter of fact, hey, don't talk about her like that. You guys can meet her. She's great. Anyway,
That's
who wants a
fair.
snack? That's a really, he shut the conversation down, which is, I don't know. It's not an easy skill to have.
But it called for a blunt solution, and he is a blunt man, so it worked out perfectly,
That's fair.
Besides, he has his own ulterior motives around
Yes.
Malta and the satrap. So
That's true.
But he effectively ends that conversation, and Serilla talks about him being the bridge between the two societies at this point, and ultimately decides, okay, we'll take advantage where we can, and I'll just go tonight, and I'll make as many connections and see my new life.
Right. But as she's getting ready, because she's back to getting ready, she isn't really sure what to wear. She pulls a gown from her wardrobe. It would do, she decided. It was simple but well made. Surely that would be appropriate for an evening among provincial folk. I feel like that is so interesting of a choice of, oh, I have to dress demurely to really get to the good side of these old traders. They'll really appreciate a well-made dress, which would be true in a normal circumstance, but this is a ball.
It's the full-on like white savior complex in Serilla's mind. You know, these are like the outback people who need help, and I'm the smart one who knows all about them.
Yeah, very like, these hicks won't know anything anyway. There's no way anything they do could be elegant or good.
Right.
Which is odd. Like they're not stuck there with no outside world contact. It's not like they wouldn't be able to be up on the latest fashion. I mean, maybe not the latest
it's just
fashion.
Silly.
I don't know. But as Serilla is changing, we see a little bit of a darker mood change. She can no longer look in mirrors while she changes because she has a lot of bruising from her time on the ship
that have not fully faded yet. They're healing, but there's still marks.
But she didn't realize how bad it was until the first time she changed in front of a mirror, and it sent her into a full-on panic attack because she thought for certain that everyone would know what had happened to her.
Yeah, she says they would know. They would all know. How could anyone look at her and not know how badly she had been hurt? It had taken her until noon to compress her feelings and master them again. The panic had passed, and she had been able to join the party, pleading a morning headache as excuse for her absence. Since then, she had wondered if it were strength or a sort of madness that let her pretend she was normal. As before, she resolved to create for herself a place where no man had authority over her. She lifted her chin as she touched scent to her throat. Tonight, she told herself, the opportunity might come tonight. If it did, she would be ready. So we see insight into her plans as well to safeguard her future.
Right.
I mean, she's not doing a healthy thing for her, compressing those feelings and kind of using them, but obviously it's a very traumatic event that happened just recently, and there are no therapists to talk to. She can't talk to anybody, really, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't know who is safe to talk to because she plans on abandoning the satrap, which is treason.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's an awful situation, but we see in her a readiness to take control of something where, what does she say? A place where no man had authority over her. She wants to create that for herself.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting about her, that her reaction to this is, I'm going to make sure that I have absolute power. It really is reminiscent of how Malta feels, I think, that Malta also wants to become someone who has power, to take the power from the men and have that. I don't know. It's just this interesting through line of these women dealing with the world that they're in and trying to grapple for power that isn't given to them. They have to fight really hard for. Mm-hmm. And I find Serilla's grasp for power, while it is not done in a way that's good, I guess, it's still sympathetic and it still makes sense to her.
Yeah.
I think Serilla is such an interesting character study, right? She is so gray, I guess, and morally, and just the way she chooses to go about things, but also she's so sympathetic.
Yeah, because she's just acting as someone hurt.
Yeah, and she's trying to get over this trauma that has been done to her, and she does come from a lot of privilege, and I don't know, I still don't like Serilla, I will say. I don't think she's in my top 5.
No.
But I do think that she is a really good character.
Yeah.
In general. Like, I think she's done really well.
And now we move over to see Grag and Reyn's preparation for the ball.
Right. It's from Reyn's point of view.
Yep. So we find out that Grag, since he was aboard the Kendry, and the plan was to drop Reyn off at Bingtown and then sail to wherever Reyn was to Grag wherever Greg was going to go. That can't happen because there's a blockade. So Greg had to be taken ashore, and he was dressed as a Reyn cousin to Reyn Kupris.
Right.
And now Reyn is staying at Greg's house, but they're still pretending that it's the two Kuprises there because Greg is not supposed to be around.
Right.
He didn't intend to come ashore, and there's no place for him to go, and he's still wanted.
Yes,
and so now he has to learn how to deal with a veil.
Yes, because last time he was in town, he had burned down a building and was the scapegoat for that. So he is still wanted by the police or their version of police. We are coming into the scene with Grag complaining. He is annoyed by the veil, like you said. It's stuffy and itchy, and he doesn't understand how Reyn stands it. Which Reyn responds with, I have lighter veils. I just needed to make sure that you were fully covered.
Yeah, not recognized. Well, Greg's mom pushes into the room, Neria Tanira, and she scowls at Greg and says, it is a relief to have Greg at home and know he is safe. Do have something hot to eat, Reyn. And then turns on Greg and says, put that veil back on, Greg, and the gloves and hood. What if I had been a serving girl? I have told you, I trust no one. For as long as you are at home, we must carry on the pretense that you are a Kupris from the Reyn Wilds, guesting with us. Otherwise, you endanger your own life. Since we spirited you out of town, the offer for your capture has only gone up. Half the vandalism to new trader businesses and the Satrap's ministries that has gone on in your absence has been attributed to you. She turned from her son and began dishing up soup for Reyn as she continued. You're near a hero to some of the young men in town. I fear it is all getting out of hand, and the Satrap's minister has made you the scapegoat for it. The trader's sons dare one another to Tanira a warehouse, and all know what is meant by that. She shook her head. No matter how quietly your sisters and I live, folk will turn and whisper when we go into town. You are not safe here, my son. I wish your father were here. I declare I am at my wit's end to know how to protect you. She pointed commandingly at the discarded veil. I'm a bit old to be hiding behind your skirts, Mother, Greg protested as he picked up the veil with distaste. I'll put this on after I've eaten. I'm a bit old to hope to have another son if they kill you, she pointed out in a soft voice. Put them on now and get used to them, she begged. This disguise is your only hope. Son alone knows when the Kendry or any other ship will get out of Bingtown. You must continue to play the part of a Reyn Wilder, and play it convincingly. Will you help him? She looks at Reyn. So, we get a little bit more about how Bingtown is going. Right. Attacks are still being had on warehouses, on Satrap's ministries, on new trader businesses in particular.
Right.
A lot of stuff is being blamed on Greg, but a sentiment is going around the young man that Greg is kind of a hero for that.
Right.
And that the rebellious nature of that initial encounter, the burning of the warehouses, is becoming a little bit more common.
Yeah. I did want to quick say, I find it really interesting that Brashen has such a bad reputation and is looked at as this man who, or when he was younger, a boy who would lead the other traders' sons into bad paths, lead them down bad paths. And he was a bad influence. He's this bad kid. And now as an adult, we have Greg, who still was holding on to that ideal of Brashen. So it's clearly what people still think of Brashen as this kid who went off the deep end. And yet it is Greg, the one who is this upstanding, proper, young trader son who is creating this mess and leading the young boys astray into becoming revolutionaries. It's not Brashen.
Fun little duality there.
Yeah, I found that really interesting that we have doing a Tanira, not doing a Trell, you know? It's...
Well, doing a Trell would be at 14 gambling and then putting all of your money at your father's door and skipping class.
But yeah, so I found that really interesting, especially because Brashen and Grag are supposed to be the like two love interests fighting for
Right.
Althea, and just how similar they are and yet so different.
Mm-hmm.
But we have here Grag's mother kind of begging Grag to be safe, right?
Yeah.
He needs to put everything on. They can't trust anybody in the home. Please just be good.
Mm-hmm.
And Grag, you know, he's trying to say, I'm a little too old to be hiding behind your skirt, Mom. But Reyn says that he will help. He's going to make sure that Grag is fine.
Mm-hmm. And Reyn assures Greg's mother that, yes, I brought enough clothes. I was very nervous, so I brought enough to clothe half a dozen men. So it's all right. He can borrow some of my stuff.
Right. And Greg's mother lets them know that she has told all of the servants that they are very private young men and that they are not to be disturbed, and that the only the people serving them will be Greg's two little sisters, to which she then points at Grag and says, do not take advantage of that.
He's already grinning wickedly, according to Reyn. Just funny.
And then she says, just be serious, Greg. You need to stay home and stay safe. To which Reyn actually disagrees.
Yeah. So Greg points out that like it would look weird for me to come all the way from the Reyn Wilds and stay home. And Reyn agrees with that, like especially if we're supposed to be cousins. And then his mom's like, what if you just take ill? And then Reyn's like, well, then I would have to stay home. You know, it would be weird for me to go on.
Yeah. And then somebody else would also have to stay home with him, because you can't just leave a guest sick home sick at home. And who are they going to leave home at the best ball to ever happen in Bingtown with his two little sisters? Nobody. They have to go.
The Neria says, Greg, I beg you, none of your wildness tonight. You shall go then, as you seem so set on it. But I beg you, do not be tempted to do anything to call attention to yourself. Remember, the trouble you bring down may fall upon others besides yourself, your sisters, for instance. I'll behave like a very gentlemanly Rainwilder, mother, I promise. But if we are not to be late, we must all make haste now to get ready. Your sisters were ready long ago, Neria admitted. They've only been waiting for me. Not that it takes long for an old woman like myself to dress. I do not pay as much attention to primp and powder as they do. Greg leaned back with a soft snort. That means we have plenty of time to eat, bathe, and dress, Reyn. No woman in my family can be ready to do anything in less than half a watch. We shall see, Reyn told him pleasantly. You may find that attiring yourself as a Rainwilder takes longer than you think. A Rainwild man seldom uses a valet or body servant. It is not our way, and you must practice, at least a bit, how to sip a glass of wine through a veil. Put it on. I'll show you now, so my cousin doesn't disgrace me at the ball this evening. So everything's kind of coming together here. We have Greg disguising himself as a Rainwilder, wants to see the satrap face to face.
Yeah.
And Reyn's going along with him. The young revolutionary himself is going to be in disguise with the satrap in attendance. Already some warnings about not to be too wild. We have Malta preparing herself for anything. Davad being very powerful and promising to introduce Malta to the satrap.
Right. Lots going on.
Mm-hmm. And we switch back over to Malta and her point of view of this, actually. And they're inside the rented carriage, or getting inside the rented carriage at the moment, to ride down to the summer ball.
She is finally feeling excited. She started feeling that way as soon as the carriage pulled up, but it smells like stale wine, and her mom demanded that they make sure that nothing was spilled on the seats before they let Malta sit down in her dress, and she was impatient. She wants to get to the ball.
She's glimpsing things out through her window and is resisting the urge to hang her head out there like a child to like watch all of these cool little lights and all these decorations and flowers.
Right. The Traders Concourse has been totally transformed.
Mm-hmm. So they reach the steps and she's just anxious and like, do I look all right?
Yeah. So I do just want a quick aside. I feel like in my mind, the Traders Concourse, whenever they're having meetings, is just this one story barn where it's like big enough to fit all the chairs and they can all sit in there. But during this, it's more described as like a 2-story, like I'm almost thinking like Grecian.
It's
with
the Footloose barn. They put all the benches aside and then they start dancing. You know, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It has like balconies and
and it like feels more. I don't know. It feels more elegant, and
I think that's how it's actually
supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't know. It's just so funny because whenever it's for a meeting, I just don't see it as something that needs to, I don't know, be this fancy building. But I guess it's all one building.
So she's anxious, turns to Keffria and says, "Do I look all right?" And before Keffria could answer, Malta's grandmother replied quietly, "You are the loveliest thing to grace this gathering since your mother was presented." The most shocking thing was not that she had said it with such sincerity. What amazed Malta was that, at that instant, she believed it too. Althea?
Poor Althea, that's what I was
Well, I mean, it's like a good thing to say, right?
I mean,
in the moment.
yeah, but Althea was presented after Keffria.
Was she even presented? I can't remember.
Yes. Yeah, she was, because she went to balls. Like she went to dances and she was home. She definitely was presented. She's even makes some comment about when she was presented to Malta over the summer.
Yeah, it's funny though.
That's poor Althea.
So the footman opens the door at last. Grandmother descends first, followed by her mother. They stood to either side, as if they were already presenting Malta, whilst the footman helped her down from the coach. She stood between them, and then little Selden, groomed and scrubbed, came out to offer his grandmother his arm. She took it with a smile. The night was suddenly a mystical and magical place. Little glass cups in different hues held candles that edged the steps of the entrance. Other families clad in their best and bearing their symbolic offerings to the Reyn traders were making their way into the hall. Keffria, as trader for the Vestred family, carried their offering. It was a simple tray of carved wood, one that grandfather had brought back from the Spice Isles long ago. On it were 6 little pots of homemade preserves. Malta knew that the gifts were largely symbolic, gestures of remembered bonds and kinship. Even so, she could remember when the gift had been lengths of rainbow-hued silk so heavy that Papa had to help grandfather carry them. It did not matter, she told herself stoutly. As if her grandmother sensed her uncertainty, she whispered, "The receiver of the gifts tonight is none other than our old friend Cowlin Festru. She has always loved our sweet cherry preserves. She will know we thought especially of her when we prepared this gift. All will be well." All will be well. Malta lifted her eyes to the top of the steps. The smile that dawned on her face was genuine. All would be well. As Rach had shown her, and she had practiced on steps at home, she set her hands lightly on her skirts and lifted them just enough to help them skim the ground. She kept her chin up, her eyes on her destination, as if she had never even considered she might trip over her own skirts. She enters the trader's concourse. So this is a wild change from the first time she entered in a ball that we saw in the books, when she hired her own dressmaker and ran away. And she's like, "Rach doesn't know anything. She's just a slave." And then Rach was told to teach her. And now she's taking those lessons and is entering the trader's concourse in a totally different light.
Yes, and not hiding in the shadows as other families gather.
Right, exactly. So we get a brief description of what the hall looks like. It is dazzling. There's music playing, but no one dancing because there's small knots of people talking right now. Malta notes that the raised dais that was reserved for the visiting representative of the Reynwalds and the Bingtown council members had been enlarged, and no doubt the satrap and companions would be up there as well, because that would be an honor for them to sit at the high table.
Right. And as she's sitting there looking around, she realizes that technically she's not a young woman yet. She's still a child. So she gets to go walk around without an escort for the last time.
Yeah.
And she's really excited about this.
Free to mingle without social restraint. And her attention catches on a figure, at once familiar and strange. Dello Trell swept up to her in a wave of scent and rustling fabric. Sparkling blue stones shone at her throat and wrists and on the fine silver chains that secured her upswept hair. Her eyes and mouth were expertly painted. She carried herself scrupulously erect, and the polite expression on her face was as still as a doll's painted smile. Malta blinked her eyes, intimidated by this woman grown. Dello regarded her coolly. Yet for all that, Malta suddenly realized she was still Dello Trell. Malta found herself smiling widely at her old friend. She caught both her hands in hers, squeezed them warmly, and heard herself say, "Here we are. Did you ever really believe we would be here?" Dello's painted face of pleased interest held steady. For an instant, Malta's heart lurched within her. If Dello snubbed her now... Then Dello's smile cracked just a fraction wider than it had been. She pulled Malta closer and whispered, "I was so nervous all day. I was afraid to eat for fear I would get the trots. Now that I am here, I am so hungry that my stomach is growling like a bear. Malta, what shall I do if I am dancing or talking with someone and it makes a noise?" "Look at someone else accusingly," Malta suggested facetiously.
And they're two little girls having a good time again.
Yeah, exactly. The last little childhood memory.
Yeah. And for a moment, all is forgotten. We're in this with Malta. She is excited. There is this thing happening, this big thing, and she gets to enjoy it. Everything is put aside. All that matters right now is what's going on and the excitement and her friend Dello and this scared feeling of, oh no, what if Dello snubs me?
Right.
And of course, Dello won't do that. They're best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this nice little surface level chat that kind of excuses the whole summer that's been weird between them, where they get to just be two girls excited for their debut.
And then it changes a little bit because Dello is asking about, like, "Hey, tell me what you've heard that's going on in Bingtown."
Yeah.
"Whenever I come into the room, Papa and Serwin stop speaking about it. They say they don't want to frighten me with things I can't understand. Mama talks only of how to hold my elbows in or what to do if I drop something at the table. It drives me mad. Are we truly on the brink of war?" So she's talking about, like, the Chaldeans, how they might sweep in and burn everything and kill us all. You can imagine what she would do. She said they would do with us, this person who was gossiping to her.
Kitten Shuyev.
Yes. So it just goes to show the difference between the two in the past year as well, of like how they were raised and what they were taught.
Right. Yeah.
So Malta's, patting her friend's hand comfortingly, saying, "I scarcely think they would attempt that with the satrap here. Don't worry. This dance is fine. All the traders would have to do is take him hostage. That he came ashore with the first group without guards is why we can believe he has truly come to mediate and negotiate. Besides, we were not all at the ball tonight. The live ships maintain their vigil. Like, we're safe. Don't worry, Dello. It's fine." Dello shakes her head. "How do you do it? You comprehend things so well. Sometimes you sound almost like a man when you talk." Malta was taken aback for a moment, then decided the comment had been intended as a compliment. She nearly shrugged, then remembered how to act like a lady and lifted her eyebrow instead. Very interesting comment from Dello there, which is a compliment coming from the young generation. Like, you almost sound like a man because you comprehend things so well and know news.
Yeah. It's really interesting, this sense of these young women who want to know what's going on, but they're being told, no, that's for men. That's not for you. You don't need to worry about it, which only makes them worry more because then they don't know what's going on. And to have Malta there to explain what's happening, and she actually does know what's happening. I kind of hope it puts in her mind the fact that her family, though they aren't following the norms, are giving her an advantage and giving her a chance at better life by letting her think on her own and know the adult stuff happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So Malta brings up also they let the Kendry through, and I heard that Reyn was aboard. I hope he is. I have no word of him. Instead of looking pleased for her, Dello looked troubled, basically saying, "Serwin will not rejoice. He hoped to have you to himself tonight." And Malta could not resist. "Surely I am permitted to dance with whom I please tonight. I have not given my promise to Reyn yet." Some of her old giddiness swept through her. I shall certainly save a dance for Serwyn, and perhaps for others as well, she added mysteriously. As she had just given herself permission, her eyes swept over the gathered folk, lingering on the young men. As if they were surveying a tray of dainties, she invited Dello. And who do you think your first dance will be with? My fourth, you mean? I have a father, a brother, and an uncle who will claim dances with me after I am presented. I had the most awful dream last night. I dreamed that at the moment I was presented and was making my curtsy, the stitches in my dress all came out and my skirt fell off. I woke up shrieking. Can you imagine a worse dream than that? A tiny chill went up Malta's spine. For a moment, the brightness of the ball dimmed and the music seemed to fade. She clenched her teeth and willed the darkness away. Actually, I can. But look, the servants are ready at the refreshment table. Let's go and get something to still the bear in your stomach. So again, another mention of the bad dreams that she has been having.
Oh, I thought this was the fact that her father wasn't even there.
I mean, maybe. This was specifically in reference to a dream, right? Of Dello having a dream and waking up from that. I took it immediately as like Intaglia thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I guess I read it as her whole life right now is a bad dream that she wants to wake up from. And so
that's definitely true.
Her friend being like, can you imagine anything worse than your underwear showing at this? Like, yeah, my dad dying. He's not here.
That's fair. Yeah, it really goes to show the difference between their two lives right now. Like their whole conversation has been, Dello being the sheltered one and Malta being the cynical world weary, as Keffria put it.
True.
Well, switch back over to the last point of view of this chapter.
Right, which is Davad.
A Davad point of view. I don't know if this is our second one or first one of his, but it's an interesting way because in this point of view, you mentioned earlier in the chapter, like maybe he is aware of some of the things he does. I don't think he is aware of some of the comments that he makes.
Fair enough.
Like he's trying to be comforting and he's just like insulting instead.
Yeah.
But we get his inner thoughts about what he plans to do and how he still is always greedy and always thinking of his own power.
Right. Yeah. So he is wiping his sweaty hands on the knees of his trousers, which we have seen.
A faux pas.
Yes. But we've also seen him do in front of the Vestrits. The Vestrits always note that he does this. This is his maybe nervous habit. And he is kind of shocked at his luck that he is here with he's going to the summer ball with the satrap and two companions.
Yeah, not alone this time, not this year. He's going with hugely powerful and famous people.
Yes. Beside him was the lovely companion Kiki in an astonishing gown wrought of feathers and lace. Beside him was the
less flamboyant,
yes,
but still important companion Serilla in her demure cream gown.
He would escort them to the ball. He would sit at the table with them. He would introduce them to all the Bingtown society tonight. Yes, he would show them all how he wished his beloved wife had survived to see this triumph. Would she think this was a triumph?
Who knows? We don't know Doral, really.
That's true.
And she seems like she was really good friends with Ronica, so I kind of doubt it, because she would see a lot of what he was doing as a betrayal to old trader values, right?
Right.
But at the same time, he's doing it in her memory.
Yeah, I find it so interesting. It seems as though, from what we know, Doral kept him grounded and polite, I guess. Like, she really helped him navigate the world and maybe see things a little bit more as they are, and rather than how he seems to think things are.
Right.
And so without her here, and just, it's been over a decade now, him doing this in her memory seems odd just because of how he's gotten here. It's almost like it doesn't matter the means as long as the ends are good.
Yeah.
And that she wouldn't care about that either. And maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she didn't care as long as they saved face. I don't know.
I mean, it's a lot of that's a lot of the message and a lot of the different characters. Like Kenneth.
Yeah.
And Wintrow's belief in Kennet is that the ends justify the means at the
Right.
moment. So
Yeah. And so here we have Davad. The thought of Doral really kind of dampers his mood a little, but then he kind of shakes that off because
I do want to point out when he's thinking of Doral there, he mentions she and the boys had been claimed years ago when the Reyn Wilders brought the blood plague down the river. So many had died then, so very many. So again, we see an insight into Davad blames the Reyn Wilders. This is, I think, the second or third time it's kind of been brought up. But this is directly from his point of view here.
Right. He also mentions the plague had most cruelly spared him, left him to live alone, speaking to the memories of his families, always imagining what they would say, what they would think of all he was doing each day. Doral would be pleased and proud. He was sure of it. So he's kind of crazy, question mark. He's just been
Lost
talking
in grief for 20 years.
Talking to himself, not even to himself, to his dead family members for years alone. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, listen, I talk to myself aloud all the time. It just, I don't know, it's like even more sad knowing how far he's fallen in the old traders standing and just, I don't know. It's just so sad. I don't know.
He follows it up with saying, and the other Bingtown traders would concede that he was as shrewd and foresighted a trader as they had ever seen. Tonight he was going to bring it all together. The satrap himself would dine with them, and they would remember all that Jamelia and elegant society meant to Bingtown. In the weeks to come, he would be at the satrap's side, as he and his companions healed the rift between the old and new traders. He could not begin to imagine the trade benefits that would bring to his door, not to mention that he would finally recapture his social stature with the Bingtown traders. They'd have to welcome him back into their midst, and admit that, over the years, he had seen more keenly than they had. So again, he wants to live his power fantasy here, right? Like, he really truly believes that this is his redemption arc. He needs that redemption in order to prove to himself that he was on the right path to please the memory of his dead family.
Right. And I think this does point out that he is aware that he does not have good standing.
Yeah, I think he has been aware of that.
But it's also weird to me that he thinks that a simple talk with the satrap is going to heal the rift, that something can be done to heal this rift. I feel like
in the weeks to come, but
right. But I mean, I don't know. It just feels
right. This is his fantasy. This is what he's
best case scenario outcome.
This is what he is manifesting into truth here. He smiles to himself as he considers the final capstone to his evening's plan. Lovely as Kiki and Serilla were, they were drab compared to Malta Vestrit. They were fine as companions, as advisors, and intellectuals. But tonight it was Davad's intention to introduce the satrap to his future consort. He was so certain the young man would be smitten with Malta that he could already almost imagine the festivities for their wedding. There would have to be 2 ceremonies, one in Bingtown and a second, grander one in Jamelia. He would certainly attend to both of them. It would save the Vestrit fortune and redeem him in Ronika's eyes. It would link Bingtown and Jamelia forever. Davad Restart would be remembered forever as the man who had reconciled the towns. Years from now, the satrap's children would call him Uncle Davad. He chuckled warmly to himself, swept away on a glorious tide of his fortune. Yeah, so again, this is like his best case. I am going to make this happen. And honestly, he's kind of close to making it happen.
I mean, yeah, but
he's right about half of it. Wrong about Ronika and the Vestrits in general in Malta.
I just don't see why he thinks selling Malta off to the satrap would be a good decision. Also, what about the satrap makes him think that he's a good person? You know what I mean?
Where does that factor into it?
I guess, but that should. If he cares about the Vestrits, why would he want Malta to be with this guy who parties and...
He cares about the Vestrits, but the way he sees things is very different, it seems to me, than other people. Because immediately he's like, this is beneficial in so many ways because Ronika will like me again, because the Vestrit fortune will be returned.
Right.
There are so many trade opportunities here. It will bring peace to both of the cities. It's a win-win-win-win-win for everybody. He's not thinking of the personal relationships between the two, right? This is a
Fair.
political arrangement for him, and that's the benefits that he sees because he sees the profits. That's what we've
Right.
talked about before. He sees the greed and everything, and that's what Ronica thinks too. So he knows he's fallen out of favor with all the old town traders or the old Bingtown traders, and he knows that Ronica doesn't approve of a lot of his current policies and thoughts, and he does cherish that relationship, that friendship. But the only way he knows how to restore that is through profits.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That it's not necessarily ever about the people. It's
Right.
more about the money.
Yeah.
And clearly that's why they're so upset, is because they have no money. It can't be because they want their family to be okay.
Yeah. And honestly, at the beginning of everything, it was a lot about the money for the Vestrits too.
Yeah, definitely.
They've gone through a lot that have changed that. I mean, obviously, Davad Restart is on the the hard end of it's all about the money.
Right.
But for him, this does fix everything. In his eyes, this is like there is no losing in the situation because he doesn't care about the Rainwilders.
Right.
He literally hates them and thinks they killed his family. So
Yeah, fair
he's
enough.
like, the Cooper's family does not matter. If Jamelia and Bingtown are linked, we can coexist together.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Just weird. Also, I just keep thinking about the fact that he's an old trader but does not have a live ship.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it just is interesting because I keep forgetting that
Yeah.
they exist. So every once in a while I have that thought and I go,
there were only, how many logs did they say? Maybe 13 or something? 13
there's
logs?
more than 13 live ships.
I don't think so. Because it was just a couple chapters ago when Reyn was talking about the family and like when they inherited the Rooster Chamber, and there was only like 12 or 13 logs, I'm pretty sure. And there might only be 11 live ships because Paragon was made out of 2.
But also then there'd have to be only 10 live ships because the long man, what's it
I
called?
still call Tarman a live
Tarman.
ship. Yeah.
Yeah,
still
so
consider him.
are you
I consider him a live ship with like
as part of the 11?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like whatever it was, it's not a lot, right? And there's a lot more old like Bingtown trader families. We don't get the names out of all of them either.
No, we know of at least 4 by name. No, 5 because
Well, Tarman, Ophelia, Ringsgold, Kendry, Vivacia is 5. And I feel like
Ophelia?
I thought that was the first one I said.
I thought you said Tarman first. Sorry, I was
Tarman, Ophelia, Ringsgold, Kendry, Vivacia.
Paragon.
Paragon is 6. So that uses 7 logs right there, and we just don't know all of them.
Yeah. That just the reason I feel like there's more than that, because at that point, if we're saying there's only 11, that means there's only 4 other ones. Ophelia says they have to wait to get back for her to talk with the other live ships about creating a commotion to get Vivacia back to
put
her.
pressure.
Yeah. And if we don't include Tarman or Paragon or Vivacia, that means there are 8 ships that then are going to put enough pressure on all of the old traders to be able to get Vivacia back.
That's their reputation in the world.
I guess. That just feels like 8 families having that much power is weird. I don't know. It doesn't matter, but weird.
Yeah. I think there was a specific number in that chapter. I mean, I could be wrong on the specifics.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure there was a specific or a close to specific number.
I guess I didn't think there were like 30 live ships, but I thought there was like close to 20, like 25 maybe in my head. But I get that like 11, that's so crazy low. And I mean, only 10 live ship figureheads. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, anyway, doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's not
neither here nor there.
And it doesn't matter to Davad either, because he does not like The Reyn Wilders.
Yes.
So
he is getting swept away in his own fantasy and then realizes that companion Serilla is looking at him uncertainly.
He's chuckling to himself.
Yes.
So
his heart suddenly went out to the woman. No doubt the satrap would have no further use of her once he married a woman who was Bingtown born and raised. He leaned towards her and patted her knee companionably. Don't fret about your gown, he whispered to her. I'm sure that all of Bingtown will honor you for your position, no matter what you are wearing. For an instant, the poor thing just stared at him wide-eyed. Then she smiled. Why, Trader Restart, how kind of you to attempt to be comforting. Not at all, not at all. I simply wish to put you at ease, he assured her, and then leaned back in the seat of his carriage. It was going to be a momentous evening in his life. He was sure of it.
It's so funny. Like that's why I say I don't think he's aware of it. He is trying to be comforting.
Yeah, fair enough. He's like, oh, the poor girl's nervous. Don't worry. It's okay that you look frumpy. They like your personality. Like,
and you're really important, so
it's okay.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. But it's even more funny that that's what he, first of all, assumed she's worried about. But second of all, that was his go-to of like, wow, she is not dressed for the occasion, when we just had Serilla's point of view where she's like, oh, these poor provincial people, they wouldn't know fashion, so I have to do a good make of, they'll get the cut and the style. And I feel like the other traders will understand that it is an expensive make. I don't think Davad can see that. I don't know. He's a really shrewd trader. Maybe he does. No, I don't know. But it's just like funny to me, the optics of Serilla being like, oh, I'm so far above these cave people.
Right.
And then Davad being like, oh, poor thing. She's so underdressed.
The long chapter setting up everything. The calm before the storm. And I'm excited to get into kind of the height of it next time.
I know. We're finally in the part of the book where I am
invested.
Eager to read more chapters, which took a really long time. And I feel like I didn't really feel that way at the end of the last book.
I did. Mm-hmm. I think it always happens about this way, like 2/3 to 3/4 of the way in, when the climax is kind of ramping up and everything's getting going. And that's just because we're reading it on such a slow level, right? If we were reading this, a couple chapters at a time, you breeze through those.
Definitely.
And you get to like interesting parts every single time. I mean, it's all interesting, but you get to exciting parts that catches your brain, no matter if you like political intrigue or character moments or action, those are kind of spaced out, but one chapter a week is just like,
sometimes very excruciating.
You dwell on something that you might not enjoy as much,
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like there's a lot of chapters that are just building. Yeah. And it is setting those foundations so that later the story makes sense and it has all that lore. It's, really getting everything more solidified in the world. But these chapters, they don't have to rely on doing that as much. And so they go a lot quicker. I care more. I'm so excited to see what action leads to the next and to be reminded. I just get excited this part of the book. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm excited to read more as well. So thank you so much for following along, listening. If you have thoughts on, Malta's transformation, her identity crisis, please let us know. Talk to us about any thoughts you had about reading these books for the first time in this moment, what leading up to it. Talk to us about Davad.
Yeah.
Or the Reyn Wilders or Grag's reputation. You can email us at isfitshappy@gmail.com, or you can message us or comment on any of our posts on all of our social medias. We're at isfitshappy on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, what have you. So find us, reach out to us. We're on isfitshappy.com. There's more links there. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know how you're doing.
Yeah. See you next week. Okay, just a short one this week where we're going to talk about some stuff you guys have brought to our attention. First, we'll start with an email we got from Jonas. The email is about Sorkor, and I think it's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
So when Kenneth says to Sorkor, if you must, and then quickly says, and of course you must, about taking his woman with him on the boat. Yes, Alyssum. Jonas wants to know, does Sorkor buy it? Does he know Kenneth well enough to know that he's a little bit heartless and is just sort of nodding along like, yeah, you better try to save this? Or does he believe that Kenneth really means and of course you must, because what else does she have going for her here? Because later he is so fervently devoted. It could go either way. What do you think?
I think he buys it. I think previously, like when we first see Sorkor, he is devoutly loyal to Kenneth.
Yeah.
Then there's Kenneth bringing him in on his plans, and they have a little bit more arguments, and there's a little bit more of like pushback from Sorkor. And then afterwards, Kenneth really shows his colors by freeing more slaves, and Sorkor's really in. Like, he really totally buys in on everything there. And I think if Kenneth left it at like the if you must, yeah, it would have created maybe a rift between them of just being like, I'm loyal, but like he doesn't really care about me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was necessary for Kenneth to fully explain it. And because Sorkor wants to fully believe in Kenneth, he grasps onto that. And is just like, yep, he does truly believe in me and this cause and likes me as a person.
I feel like maybe Sorkor, I feel like he's a lot smarter than Kenneth lets us believe he is. And I want to believe...
Kenneth is surprised by how smart he is, too.
Yeah,
a couple times.
Yeah. So I want to believe that Sorkor... Well, I think Sorkor believes it by the end of the ramble of like, of course you must take her with you. I think he also knows that Kenneth probably doesn't actually care, but is just trying to be nice to him, if that makes sense. Like, I get the feeling that Sorkor is like,
and I think
okay,
that's enough.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, he doesn't have to mean it, but the fact that he's willing to say it for his benefit is enough for Sorkor. And so I don't know if that necessarily means that I think that he's buying it per se, but I think he believes that Kenneth
is on his side.
Is friends with him and cares about his opinion.
Okay.
Because, like...
We're similar then.
Yeah, just a little different. I think I'm giving Sorkor a little bit more credit. But, I mean, it doesn't really matter ultimately because he is a very big supporter of Kenneth. I think Sorkor is a very loyal person in general and cares a lot about Kenneth. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, I think even if Kenneth wouldn't have said the rest, like... He would have
stayed with him, but that comment would have been like in the back of Sorkor's mind.
Yeah. So I think this was just a like, he doesn't care the choices that I make because he has so much respect for me, but he also wants me to know that, like, of course he gets why I'm doing it. Right. He just doesn't care. Like, I don't know. So thank you, Jonas, for that question because it's really fun to think about.
And then next we had some comments on Facebook from Degenhart. First one here was just a quick comment about different versions. I know we've talked in the past about different translations and people reading in different languages, and Degenhart says that it's very hard to determine what is a capitalized noun in the German version because all their nouns are capitalized, and I had not even thought about that because Robin Hobb does capitalize some things because we were talking about catalyst with a capital C.
Versus a lowercase c.
And I didn't even know that of German, that all the nouns are capitalized. So,
I mean,
interesting.
It could be not necessarily a German rule. It could just be the translator choice, you know?
Could be, yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't know. Obviously, I don't speak German, so not obviously. You guys don't know me. But
I think if you're speaking about maybes and translator, I think it's kind of obvious.
Yes, fair enough. I always
anyway, cool. Yeah,
yes,
cool
thing. It's cool to know that in different translations there are changes like that made, which does, I think, change the reading of it.
It does, although I mean, I think Robin Hobb has spoken about this a few times on, I don't know, Facebook or maybe even her blog, that translation is an art because
Right.
you have to rewrite things into what makes sense for idioms, for turns of phrase, for names in that native tongue. So I feel like with the capitalization of all the nouns, maybe it doesn't matter in the English translation either, or the English version. Maybe the capitalized catalyst lowercase c does not matter. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because all of the equal importance placed in German language.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No way of knowing, I guess.
Yeah.
But it is cool to know the differences in different translations. Dagenhart also wanted to talk about how Althea is very stubborn.
Yes. And her issue dealing with the crew. We talked about that a bit last episode because that was kind of her main problem. And Dagenhart wants to make it clear and have us talk about that her main problem with Half is sexism.
Yes, absolutely.
And yes, 100% it is.
Yeah, I think we were harping a little bit more on the fact that she wasn't asking for help rather than focusing on what it is that she needed help with.
Yeah, exactly. I think Emma and I both knew what we were talking about, and we're talking about other things besides the main issue.
Yes.
But yes, the main issue is that Half is sexist in how he acts and how he portrays his actions to the crew, right? Kind of implying that as a woman, she can't keep up or is not the proper fit for the second mate.
Right.
We were just talking about how it looks, the optics wise, how it looks for her not to punish him. But yes, the issue with Half is his sexism.
And I think we should be very clear when we're saying this, that we do have an issue with how Half is treating her. And he is the problem. Like, we don't think regardless of how Althea responds, it is not her fault that he treats her this way.
It's just that her response or lack thereof can create further issues.
Yes, exactly. And so, so that is a very important thing to point out and something that we should just outright say.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing that out for us. And then also love that Luke is going to start his own little cult in the whites.
Yeah, Dagenhart says Luke's "everyone is a catalyst" could be grounds for a schism in the Church of the Whites, if there were such a thing. One half would be, there's one that is special for everybody, and the other one is everyone has the potential to be.
Yes. So now we've learned that Luke and I are a separate religion household. He believes in the whites, and I believe in Saw.
Wow.
Many faces of Saw.
Not my Saw.
Wintro has converted me, He's a great priest.
Wow. I think Sawdar got you.
Yeah, he really made me think, you know what? Saw does want me to murder people to get my way.
But, Dagenhart, that does make me think that it would be interesting to read like a novella, maybe not like a 400-page novel about it, but like a novella about the religious intrigue between different sects of white prophets or Saw or whatever.
Yeah.
And their different beliefs.
Yeah.
Cool little subsection of life that would be interesting to read about.
Definitely. So thank you, Dagenhart. And thank you, Jonas. And thank you to everyone who writes in. We always enjoy seeing what you have to say. And it's always fun to talk to you guys. Also, happy 4 years to the podcast.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that actually. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone who has tuned in over the years. We started out, I don't know, first episode was like March 19th or 20th or something like that. That was our trailer, I think. And I think our first episode got 30 views in a week or a month, maybe a week. And now we're closing in on about 230 every week-ish.
Yeah. Which is
in the first
crazy
week.
Amount of people.
So yeah, that's awesome. We have over 150,000 downloads over these 4 years. We appreciate everyone who has tuned in, who has recommended it to others. It's been a wild ride, and we still got 15 more years to go.
Yeah. Basically, after this trilogy, we're 4 years in and only 4 books down. Not
man.
even 4 books down.
We're gonna have to start doing not part 1 and part 2s, but multi-chapters here at some point. Multi-chapter episodes, 4 hours long, uncut. I'm not gonna edit, 5-hour episodes. Let's just book 2 days and get through 5 chapters.
Yeah.
Oh.
But thank you guys so much for following along. And if you've just joined us recently, thank you for joining.
Yeah. Please keep recommending it. Keep bringing it up. We love to hear new voices in here. We still get messages once in a while of like, hey, I know you guys are far ahead, but I'm on episode 30. Here's a question or a comment about something. And it's always really cool to look back and see what people are commenting on, because I don't remember what I was talking about 3 years ago.
Yeah. We'd have to re-listen.
Yeah. So thank you everyone who has tuned in and really appreciated these books like we have.
Yeah, thank you guys for following along and being so kind and, I don't know, making this a fun hobby for us.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.